You know, sometimes the moments after a big speech like the State of the Union can tell you just as much as the speech itself. So today, we're going to break down the instant analysis from the Fox News panel The Five to see exactly how they framed a Donald Trump address. Let's dive right in.
Right out of the gate, the panel's reaction was all about energy and impact. Kayleigh McEnany set the tone with this line, framing the speech not as just some dry political talk, but as a really powerful, forceful event, where Trump came out swinging from the very first minute.
So what was the first big takeaway? Well, for most of the panel, it really wasn't about the specific policies. It was all about the performance. They basically saw it as a masterclass in how to command not just the room, but the entire night.
What's really interesting is how the panel drew a line between Trump's different public styles. McEnany made the case that State of the Union Trump is actually way more effective than Rally Trump. Why? Her take was that he absolutely owns this format because he has his opposition sitting right there in front of him, which changes the whole dynamic.
Okay, so beyond just the performance aspect, the panel really honed in on what they saw as a very deliberate strategy from Trump. And that strategy was to set a whole series of political traps designed to put Democrats in a total no-win situation.
Greg Gutfeld is the one who really laid out this idea, calling it the trap. And the concept is pretty simple, but, really effective. You say something that sounds like total common sense, you watch your opponent sit there and refuse to clap, and then you use that reaction as proof that they're the ones who are out of touch.
And Gutfeld broke it down into 3 easy steps. First, you create the moment. You ask the Democrats to stand for an idea that most people would agree with. Second, you exploit their hesitation when they, predictably, don't stand up. And third, you use that visual of them sitting down to prove your point to everyone watching at home. It's all a visual game.
This quote from Gutfeld really gets to the heart of the intent they saw behind the whole strategy. I mean, in his view, this wasn't some happy accident. It was a carefully planned move, designed specifically to bait Democrats into giving a reaction that would just end up hurting them politically. And that's the whole point, right? As fellow panelist Jesse Waters put it, this whole thing puts the Democrats in a classic catch-22. If they stand up and clap, it looks like Trump is winning them over. But if they stay seated with their arms crossed, well, to the average person watching, they just look crazy. No good options.
So this idea of a strategic performance leads us right into the next major theme the panel talked about, and that's showmanship. They basically argued that Trump treated the entire State of the Union less like a policy speech and way more like a primetime TV special.
Jesse Waters, for example, straight up compared it to an award show. You had the Medal of Honor, you had regular citizens being spotlighted in the crowd. Dana Perino jumped on that too, pointing out how the focus was always on people rather than policies. I mean, that dramatic family reunion of a political prisoner, that was a moment practically made for television.
And to really capture that feeling of Trump just listing off win after win, Greg Gutfeld came up with this really vivid metaphor. He said Trump was like a maitre d' at a fancy restaurant who's just so proud of the specials that he's going to list every single one of them for you no matter what. The result was what he called a mind-numbing amount of successes being presented.
But it's important to note, the praise was definitely not unanimous. The discussion on the panel had some serious pushback, and that came mainly from co-host Jessica Tarlov, who challenged both the substance and the basic facts of the speech.
So Tarlov came in with a list of what she called falsehoods. She was essentially fact-checking in real time, hitting on everything from a claim about a refugee's killer to economic statements like prices are down. She argued the whole speech was really built on a foundation that was pretty shaky.
And to push back on this idea that the speech was a huge success, Tarlov actually brought some data to the table. She pointed to a CNN poll of people who watched, and while the overall reaction was positive, the number of viewers who felt very positive was actually lower than for recent speeches by both Biden and Obama, and even for another one of Trump's own speeches.
But for Tarlov, the single most dangerous part of the whole night was this one line. She argued that when Trump said Democrats can only win by cheating, he was actively laying the groundwork for subverting a free and fair election. She saw that as a direct threat to the whole system.
And all of this brings us to the final debate they had on the panel, which was, okay, fine, but does any of it actually matter in the long run? They were pretty divided on whether a speech like this creates any real lasting political momentum. And you can see the divide was pretty clear. On one end, you have Jesse Waters saying, yes, this absolutely builds momentum. In the middle, you have Dana Perino, who was a bit more cautious, saying it all comes down to the follow-through. And then on the other end, you have Jessica Tarlov, who is skeptical that these speeches even have the same kind of impact they used to.
So, after breaking down their whole analysis, we're left with this big question.
The entire conversation on the 5 really circled around this tension between Trump's showmanship and the actual substance of his claims. And it kind of makes you wonder what really connects with voters today. Is it the spectacle, or is it the specifics?